Design shapes the way you live. I'm Nico, an interior design expert focused on the connection between home and well-being. Using science, design, and professional expertise, I'll help you shape a space that elevates your mindset and enhances your well-being. Let's create space for better living, starting now. The kitchen is one of the most used rooms in your home. And yet, for most people, it's one of the most frustrating, not in obvious ways, but in small, repeated moments. Opening the wrong drawer, not having enough space where you need it, feeling like things are always slightly in the way. And over time, those small moments start to shape how you use the space, what you cook, how often you cook, and even how you feel while you're in it. So today, I want to look at the kitchen differently, not just as a place you design, but as a space that quietly designs your behavior. So I want you to think about your kitchen in two ways. From a design perspective, do you enjoy being in this room? Or is it so sterile that it's uninviting? It has no personality? Is it so cluttered that it feels just claustrophobic or a little bit chaotic when you're in there? Is it so lacking in personality that you can't see yourself in the room? So you can't see little touches of your personality come through. And then from a habits perspective, how deliberate are you being with your design choices? Does your kitchen support your life or the lifestyle that you want? Or does it create a sense of frustration? Can you find what you need when you're moving about in the room? Is it organized enough? Does it look really nice when you're opening the drawers? Because I really believe that this space should not house unnecessary things. And it often does. Right? It should not be a small appliance graveyard. And I'm sure you have small appliances that are tucked away in some random corner that you think you might use one day and you haven't in years. I think the kitchen can be one of those rooms where people really focus on trends, or they focus on things like the layout. That becomes something they fixate on. But this is really about how your kitchen shapes your behavior daily, because a well-designed kitchen reduces effort. And when effort drops, better habits can begin. They can follow. We spend a ton of time in this room. And did you know the amount of time that you spend in the kitchen is actually linked to better health? So the more time you spend on food prep, the higher your chances are of having a better quality diet. So you might eat more vegetables and more fruit. And if you spend less than an hour prepping food, chances are you're spending more money on things like takeout or ready-made meals. So your budget is going to things that are pre-made. So regardless of where you fall on that spectrum, you are still spending time, valuable time, in this room. And I really think we should be prioritizing that. So the other day, I was making my kids their school lunches. And, I was just busily getting things together. My kids were behind me at the island eating breakfast. And I was prepping everything. I grab the mayonnaise and I start putting it on a bun, and I start thinking in my head, I wonder what the ingredients of this particular mayonnaise is. And anyway, I started kind of telling them about how important healthy food is. And I started talking to them about how grocery stores are designed, and how if you shop the perimeter, if you stay on the outside of the store, you're more likely to make better, healthier choices. And my daughter, she's, Mom, that's, so when we go to the grocery store, we start at the bakery, and then we go to the fruits and the veg, and then we go around and we have the meat section, and then we keep going, we've got dairy. And so we started going through a bit of our path in the grocery store. And then I started explaining how, A lot of the food in the center aisles doesn't even need to be refrigerated to stay edible. And I said, take this mayonnaise, for example. And we looked through the ingredients in the mayonnaise. And I was explaining preservatives and all of that because there was one ingredient that we ended up looking up and reading about. And it was kind of scary, actually. But anyway, I remember thinking in that moment, this is exactly why I believe your home can be a tool for better living. Because if you design your kitchen to support better eating habits, you are one step closer to becoming a healthier version of yourself. So the same way that grocery stores use psychology and research to inform how their layout is and where their product placement is, we can see that there's a correlation with how we design and lay out our kitchens. So imagine walking into your kitchen and dinner has been thought through, prep has been simplified, the counters are clear. So you just have this moment of feeling like things have really been taken care of and you're on top of things. You look over and there's like a cool looking lamp on the counter, a vase overflowing with flowers. There are little design touches that just elevate the space. And a little trick of the trade, if there's something in your kitchen right now that you don't like, but you can't change, you simply have to find a way to direct the eye somewhere else. But in order to do that, you have to create something that's actually worth looking at. So you simplify the design of the room. You make some beautiful stylistic choices. You customize how the room functions for you. And then you systemize things so that you actually have the chance to make better decisions. And then you host. And now some would say the kitchen is truly the heart of the home. So it becomes this sort of full circle design intention. And it's not hard to do. I know that sounds like a lot of steps, but if you're gutting your kitchen, then of course, yes, the possibilities are endless. And that's actually such an exciting stage at the beginning when you're collecting inspiration and ideas. But it's really important to first reflect on who you want to be and how you want to live habit-wise. But even if you're not renovating, you can still make your kitchen a great space, a little style, some habit tweaks, some really good systems. And now you're able to use your home as a tool. So we can thrive as individuals if the kitchen is set up in a way that shapes our habits and our behaviors. A habit is basically anything you do repeatedly, right? So it's a pattern of behavior and it can influence you in positive ways or in negative ways because our brains are wired to seek reward. So we often will just take the route of least resistance, not because we know that it's the wrong route to take. It's the easiest. So we're wired to do that. And it's not always good because that can lead to compulsive or just unsupportive behavior and habits. So imagine this. You want to have a clean kitchen every morning. Like you love the idea of walking into your kitchen in the morning and it being ready for your day. It's clean. The counters are shiny. Things are put away. Nothing is piled in the sink. There's no leftover crumbs from the night before. It just feels kept when you walk in. And that's what you want to feel. But that in order to do that, you have to spend about 30 minutes the night before cleaning and getting it to where you want it to be at night. And in that moment, all you want to do is pour a glass of wine and go get cozy and sit on the couch. So you talk yourself out of it because you've had a crazy busy day and you're tired and you just so need that downtime. So you decide to skip it. And then the morning rolls around, that alarm clock sounds, you come into the kitchen, it's 7 a.m., and there it is, the mess from the night before. And I know this, I know the feeling because I've done it. But if you tell yourself, I'm going to do this for, say, 20 nights in a row, by the time you get there, the resistance is reduced because the reward shifts. The reward becomes really the feelings of walking into a clean kitchen. You just know in that moment when you're starting to talk yourself out of it, when you're starting to choose what feels easy, and you've convinced yourself, like, no, I just need this downtime. I need to not do this right now. But you know the feeling that you're going to get in the morning. And because you've done it for however many days in a row, that feeling has really been reinforced. So in that moment, you can fall back on, know how I'm going to feel in the morning if I don't do this now. So I was reading an article the other day about habits, and I came across this, and it said every habit is more than behavior. It's a vote for who you believe you are. And I love this idea because who do you believe you are? If you keep choosing habits that really don't support you, then that's who you become. But if you choose otherwise, transformation can happen. And I know I have habits I'm working on in my kitchen right now. Cleaning at night is for sure one of them. Have you ever been in a kitchen that didn't make sense? Like you felt it? Where you had to walk to was too far to get to things like the garbage, or where the prep area was so small that it just felt like impossible to do anything efficiently. And there was zones that overlapped, like, so where the sink was, the counter run beside the sink was also where you had to prep, was also where you had to put things down from the grocery store or whatever. You know, there was like a constant shuffle. Things need to be here, then there, and then back again. You know, it really can become a dance of just unproductivity. Things get really messy fast. And yes, sometimes it is a space issue. There's just not enough, but often it's actually an allocation issue. So if you have a small space, it actually needs to be more streamlined. And I talk about this idea of room rules. So you decide how a space is used, and then you protect that. So you don't allow overlapping things. So if you think about your kitchen like that, your zones are like micro rooms. Each one has rules. And when you honor those rules, everything becomes simpler. So we talked about flow, how you move through the space and where things are happening, where things are not working. The next layer is really what's actually inside of those zones, because this is really where most kitchens start to break down, because it's not always the layout, it's what's happening within each little micro zone. It's what you reach for, what you can't quite reach for, even what you forgot you had. And this is where design and function really do start to overlap. One of the biggest shifts that you can make in your kitchen is moving away from the idea that everything needs to be hidden, and instead thinking about how things are accessed. How can you get to things? Because if you can't see something, or if it's difficult to get to, you're not going to use it. And I think we've all experienced that cabinet, right? Where things just get pushed to the back. And you forget that they exist. This is why drawers are such a better use of space, because you pull it out. Everything is visible. Everything is accessible. There's no digging, no stacking, no guessing. And there are so many ways that you can make drawers work harder. So where you have the option to add drawers to your kitchen, it is such a good use of space because you can divide them. You can create really intentional zones within a drawer. So even things like internal drawers. So there's one drawer, then you open that drawer, it's a drawer within a drawer. These things can completely change just how the space functions. And then you have pullouts. Pull-out pantry systems, pull-out shelving. These are the things that really remove friction because instead of reaching into a dark, forgotten corner, you're bringing everything to you. And even something like the Lazy Susan, which for so long has just been that spinning plastic tray, there are now so many great options. There's structured pull-out systems that actually allow you to see and access everything. So this is really about ease because if it's hard to reach, it's hard to use consistently, and it's really hard to put it back when you're done. Now, this next part is something that I think is often misunderstood, and that's surfaces, because we tend to think of countertops as something visual. And they are. They're aesthetically, they're visual, but also are they cluttered or are they clean? Countertops are really where a lot of the life happens in a kitchen, right? This is where you prep, where you unload all your groceries, where things land throughout the day, whether you like it or not. And so when countertops feel chaotic, it's not always because you have too much stuff. And I think that can be the default mentality. It's often because the surface hasn't been properly thought through, right? You don't have a really clear prep zone. You don't have that designated spot for things to land. And once they land, where do they live? So everything just ends up everywhere. It's overlapping. And this is where design decisions become really important, not just visually, but functionally. And then there's the actual material of the countertop, which is both a design choice and a lifestyle decision. And I'm going to run through a bunch of countertop materials to give you a sense of how they might fit with a particular lifestyle. So quartz is incredibly popular, and for good reason. It's durable. It doesn't require any sealing. It's non-porous, so it doesn't absorb bacteria easily. And there are so many options now that mimic natural stone beautifully. So quartz is a really low maintenance option. And then there's granite, which is more traditional. It's still a very strong stone. It's heat resistant and there's natural variation to it, but it does require some maintenance. So you have to reseal granite. If that's not something you're going to do, then granite's probably not the best choice for you. Then there's marble. I mean, I love marble. It's one of those materials that just instantly elevates a space. It's soft, it has movement, it feels lived in, but it is porous. So it can stain and it will patina over time. And so you have to be okay with that if you're going to use marble. And marble is not the most cost-effective option. And then there's laminate. Laminate is lightweight. It's affordable and it really has come a long way in terms of design. So this is the most cost-effective option. And then there's solid surface countertops, which can be seamless. They're repairable. They're non-porous. A good middle ground option, I would say. And then you have things like butcher block, which is a wood, which brings just that warmth into a space. It's softer, more organic, but it does require care and it will wear. So beside a sink, it may split over time if it's not sealed properly and taken care of in that way. And then there's concrete, which is very sort of architectural and feel and industrial, and it can be very custom. But again, it's something that needs to be maintained. And even materials like onyx, which are more rare and more high end, more sort of about the visual impact than everyday function. So when you're choosing a surface, it really comes back to how you live, right? Are you someone who cooks a lot? Are you okay with that wear and patina? Do you want something that feels perfect or something that evolves? And once those sort of functional layers are working, the flow and the storage and the surfaces, then design becomes incredibly powerful because now you're not just solving problems, you're shaping how the space feels. So kitchens have changed so much over the years. Going back 50 years, they were often smaller, tucked away rooms, almost hidden from the rest of the home. And if there was things like a butler's pantry, that would be hidden as well. And now over the years, as our lives have changed and evolved and both men and women are more involved in the kitchen. We live busier lives. They've become what they are today, which is the center of the home, the place where people gather, where life happens, where we linger. And we're seeing even more of a shift where we're bringing back things like the butler's pantry and the sculleries, even more into mainstream houses. People really want their kitchen to have personality, for it to stay clean, for it to be open and inviting. So they want the messiness and the hardworking parts of the kitchen to be tucked away. We're also seeing the rise of things like the unfitted kitchen, where instead of everything being really built in and fixed, you start to bring in elements that feel more like furniture. And I love this idea because it really brings a sense of personality into a space that can sometimes feel more fixed, more rigid. So it's really changing how we see the kitchen. And I think that both of these kind of speak to what people are craving. They want kitchens that feel more like living spaces, more inviting, more layered, and more personal in sense of how they look aesthetically. Okay, so I want to go through some design tips. When you're thinking about designing your kitchen, the first thing I would say is to look at where the opportunities are. Where are opportunities to add interest? Where are opportunities to add personality? How can you elevate the space? And of course, if you're starting from scratch, you have more flexibility. You can start from the bottom up, which of course you have a lot more to consider, right? Like your flooring becomes a decision, your cabinetry, the tone, the color, the finish, your tile, the pattern, the scale, and the placement of the tile, and even something like your island. Can it feel more like a furniture piece? Can it have legs or a different material or a slightly different tone so it really stands apart? Cabinet doors are another opportunity because you can do flat panel or shaker or something more detailed. But even if you're not doing a full renovation where you're starting from the ground up, you can look at your existing cabinetry and replace the door fronts and switch them up to something that's more elevated and something that feels more current, and even introducing glass into some of your upper cabinets, because glass, it bounces light around the room. It creates that reflection. It gives you a place to display things that matter to you as well. And that's where you start to bring your story into a space like the kitchen. Another thing is the lighting. Lighting is a big one because, this is a great opportunity to add some wow and to really add impact. Pendant lights are one of the easiest ways to change a kitchen and to direct the eye. So earlier I said, if you've got things that you can't change, changing up your lighting and making it look really interesting and beautiful directs your eye to that. But I would say, try not to match everything perfectly. So for instance, if your pendants match your hardware and that matches your faucet, and then that matches your light fixture, it just starts to read a bit flat. It's too predictable. And it starts to look more like a showroom than a home. So mixing materials and mixing those finishes and keeping it varied, that's what really creates interest and it creates impact. It's kind of like the unexpected. We get excited when our environment isn't super predictable. And even something like adding a lamp. I love a good lamp in a kitchen. Just the experience of it in colder months, right? You can imagine walking into the kitchen in the morning on a winter day and turning on your lamp, the soft glow of the light. It softens the space and it just changes how that room feels in the morning or in the evening. And then things like counter stools. Again, don't default to matching. This is really an opportunity to introduce texture. So maybe it's an upholstered chair with a different wood tone. Do an upholstered chair and then just pull a tone from the wood for the leg or match the leg if you can. Hardware is another place to play. You don't have to choose one finish either, right? It doesn't have to match everything else perfectly. And you can mix knobs and pulls. You can try things out too. So don't feel like you've got one chance to get this right. I often tell people that you can order one of a few different styles so that you can hold them up and look at them in the space. Designers will often order multiple samples and bring them and look at them just to make sure. So try things out, order a few and just see what works and then return what doesn't, right? And a backsplash, this is a big one. There's so many different options for backsplashes. Full stone is such a beautiful high-end look. It's seamless, but if that's not within budget, then just adding impact with things like tiling it all the way up to the ceiling, that creates that same sense of scale and impact. And then details like your hood fan, let it become a statement. You can do stone, plaster, metal, even something that really anchors the space visually and it draws your eyes. So a statement hood fan can actually become a focal point. At the end of the day, your kitchen is not just a place where you cook. It's where your habits are built. It's where your health decisions happen. It's where your routines are either supported or made harder. And I think often the focus is so much on how the kitchen looks. And although that is incredibly important, we can't overlook how it actually functions, how it makes you feel, how it shapes the way you live, because design doesn't just support your life, it quietly directs it. Every small decision, where something's placed, how easy something is to access, what you see when you walk in, it all adds up. So instead of trying to be more disciplined or more motivated, start with the space. Reduce the friction, make things easier, design for the life you actually want to live. Because when your environment supports you, everything else becomes easier to follow through on. Thank you for listening. If you want to go deeper, you can explore the Create Space course, my guides, and Collected, my weekly newsletter, all at yourparo.com. That's yourparo.com. Thank you for being here, and I'll see you next episode. Thanks so much for listening today. If you found this episode helpful, the best way to support the show is to follow along and share it with someone who'd love it too. And if you'd like to go a step further, you can become one of our Better Living backers. It's a small monthly contribution that helps keep the show going. And as a thank you, I'll send you a personal note along with a 15% discount for the Create Space course when it launches. You can find the Support the Show link right in the show notes. I'm so glad you're here. Thanks for creating space with me.